life, liberty, and the pursuit of happy hour.
Insanity is just a state of mind.
War isn't hell. War is war, and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse.
While MASH was a phenomenal success and earned its stars both fortune and fame, the man sitting at the very top of this list walked away from Hollywood entirely and ended up out-earning every single one of his castmates by tens of millions. Shocking, no? Several of the show's biggest on-screen stars, despite bagging a good deal of money, never came close to that level of wealth, despite starring in a cultural phenomenon that ran for over a decade and still dominates syndication decades later. Today, we'll unveil the lives and trajectories of the top 10 richest MASH actors. Their actual net worth will shock you. Watch till the end. There's a big surprise waiting for you. Number 10. McLean Stevenson, Henry Blake. McLean Stevenson entered MASH in 1972 as Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, a character written as a soft-spoken, slightly overwhelmed surgeon commanding the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital during the Korean War. At that time, Stevenson was not an unknown figure in Hollywood. Born in 1927 in Normal, Illinois, he had already spent years moving through the entertainment system as a writer, comedian, and television performer, even working in proximity to major industry names like Johnny Carson's Creative Orbit in the 1960s. He was not a breakout star, but he was visible enough to be trusted with network television roles in an era when casting decisions were tightly controlled by studio executives and audience testing. When MASH premiered on CBS on September 17, 1972, the show struggled initially in ratings, partly because audiences were unsure how to process war satire mixed with surgical realism. Stevenson's Henry Blake became one of the stabilizing forces in those early seasons. The character was not heroic in a traditional sense. He was tired, disorganized, and constantly overwhelmed by the absurdity of military bureaucracy. Yet that ordinariness made him relatable. In a series that blended dark humor with wartime trauma, Blake's presence gave the chaos a human anchor. During this period, Stevenson's annual salary climbed into the tens of thousands per episode range, modest by later television standards, but significant for the early 1970s sitcom landscape. Behind the scenes, however, Stevenson's perception of his own position began to shift. As the series slowly gained traction and ensemble chemistry solidified around Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce, Stevenson reportedly began to feel structurally limited. Henry Blake was not evolving at the same pace as other characters, and Stevenson saw an opportunity elsewhere. By 1975, he chose to leave MASH at the end of Season 3. His reasoning was straightforward. He believed his rising popularity could translate into leading man status in his own series, where he would have more control and visibility. His departure aired on March 18, 1975, in the episode Abyssinia, Henry. The ending shocked American audiences. Henry Blake was written out by having his plane shot down after leaving Korea, a narrative twist that was kept secret even from much of the cast until the episode was filmed. CBS received an unprecedented volume of viewer mail in response, reflecting how deeply audiences had connected with the character. That moment also marked a tonal shift for MASH itself, signaling a darker, more unpredictable storytelling direction in later seasons. After leaving the series, Stevenson launched The McLean Stevenson Show in 1976 on NBC. It was intended to capitalize on his visibility and position him as a standalone sitcom lead. The show, however, struggled in ratings and was canceled after one season. Over the next several years, Stevenson continued attempting new television projects, including Hello, Larry, but none replicated the cultural or commercial momentum of MASH. The television landscape had already moved forward, and ensemble-driven storytelling was proving more durable than single-star formats. Financially, Stevenson's long-term net worth is commonly estimated at around $2 million. Unlike later television stars, he did not benefit significantly from residual-rich contracts or equity stakes in the show's long-term syndication success. By the 1980s and early 1990s, Stevenson had largely transitioned into guest appearances and smaller television roles, often playing versions of himself or familiar authority figures. He passed away from a heart attack in 1996 in Los Angeles, California. He was 66 years old. Hold on, though. The stories only get more dramatic down the line. And then there's the star who made millions by other means. Moving on. Number 9. Larry Linville, Frank Burns. Larry Linville stepped into MASH in 1972 as Major Frank Burns, a character engineered to be both medically competent and emotionally fragile. Burns was designed as a controlled exaggeration of military rigidity colliding with the chaos of a Korean War surgical unit. Linville, born in 1939 in Ojai, California, had already built a career as a steady television guest actor. He had trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London, giving him a formal stage discipline that contrasted sharply with the comedic absurdity of Frank Burns. When producers developed MASH, they needed a character who could embody institutional authority while simultaneously collapsing under it. Linville's performance became the structural counterweight to Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce and Wayne Rogers's Trapper John in the early seasons, forming a triangle of tension that defined the show's comedic rhythm. During the first 3 seasons, Frank Burns evolved into one of television's most recognizable antagonists. Unlike traditional villains, Burns was not powerful in a strategic sense. He was insecure, rigid, and often exposed as incompetent in high-stress surgical environments. His relationship with Major Margaret Houlihan, played by Loretta Swit, added another layer of instability, as the two characters oscillated between professional authority and personal dysfunction. Linville's performance leaned heavily into physicality and vocal precision, often amplifying Burns's panic-driven decision-making in operating room sequences that were filmed under tight production schedules. By the mid-1970s, however, the tone of MASH began shifting. As the Korean War setting became a vehicle for darker commentary on Vietnam-era politics and human psychology, comedic exaggeration gave way to more grounded emotional storytelling. Linville later expressed that Frank Burns had reached a ceiling. The character, once essential for contrast, had become increasingly difficult to develop without repeating established patterns of jealousy, incompetence, and authority failure. In 1977, after 5 seasons, Linville made the decision to leave the series. His departure coincided with one of the show's most significant tonal transitions. Frank Burns was written out in Season 6, with his character ultimately removed from the 4077th narrative framework entirely. Post-MASH, Linville continued working steadily in television, but the industry's perception of him had fundamentally changed. The strength of Frank Burns as a character became a double-edged sword. Casting directors frequently associated Linville with authoritarian, socially awkward, or comedic antagonist roles, limiting his range in an industry increasingly driven by star-driven versatility. He appeared in guest roles across series such as The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and numerous made-for-television films, but none offered the cultural footprint of his earlier role. Financially, his net worth is commonly estimated in the $4 to $5 million range. He remained active in theater and television until he died in 2000 in Los Angeles following complications from lung cancer. He was 60 years old. Moving on. Number 8. Loretta Swit, Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. Loretta Swit entered MASH in 1972 as Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, a character initially written as a sharp-edged embodiment of military discipline within the chaotic environment of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Born in 1937 in Passaic, New Jersey, Swit had spent years building a disciplined stage career before television recognition arrived. She trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York and worked extensively in touring productions and guest television roles during the late 1960s. In the first seasons of MASH, the character was framed largely through the lens of military hierarchy and romantic entanglement, particularly her controversial relationship with Major Frank Burns, played by Larry Linville. However, what distinguished Sweet's performance was not the initial writing, but the gradual recalibration she brought to it through subtle shifts in emotional range. By the mid-1970s, Sweet became central to the show's transition. Margaret Houlihan evolved from a one-dimensional figure often defined by the nickname Hot Lips into a fully realized professional woman navigating authority, vulnerability, and isolation in a military system dominated by men. This shift occurred gradually across seasons 2 through 6, with key episodes such as Hot Lips and Empty Arms, and later character-driven arcs that reframed her identity within the unit. Behind the scenes, Sweet was deeply involved in shaping Margaret's evolution. She advocated for reducing reliance on the hot lips stereotype, pushing writers to explore Houlihan's competence as a head nurse rather than her role in comedic subplots. This creative persistence aligned with broader changes in television writing during the 1970s as networks began experimenting with serialized emotional depth. Sweet remained with MASH through its entire run, concluding with the final episode Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, which aired on February 28, 1983. That finale drew over 100 million viewers in the United States, making it one of the most watched television episodes in history. Financially, her net worth is commonly estimated at around $4 million, according to Celebrity Net Worth-style reporting. Like many actors of her era, her earnings were tied primarily to episode salaries rather than profit participation in syndication growth. After MASH ended, Sweet did not attempt to replicate the role with another long-running television series. Instead, she shifted toward theater productions, touring stage work, and guest appearances on television talk shows and game formats throughout the 1980s and 1990s. She also appeared in various TV films and special projects, maintaining a consistent but lower-profile screen presence compared to her peak years. Outside of acting, Sweet became widely recognized for her animal rights advocacy. She aligned with multiple organizations focused on wildlife protection and humane treatment initiatives. Number 7. Gary Berghoff, Radar O'Reilly. Gary Berghoff's entry into MASH carried a rare continuity that most television adaptations never achieve. Before the CBS series even began, he had already defined the role of Radar O'Reilly in Robert Altman's 1970 film MASH, shot in California and released during a turbulent moment in American culture shaped by the Vietnam War. That film version introduced Radar as a soft-spoken company clerk with an almost uncanny ability to anticipate events before they happened, a trait that would become central to the television interpretation. When CBS launched the series on September 17, 1972, Berghoff was one of only a few actors who carried over from the film into television. Born in 1943 in Bristol, Connecticut, he had trained as a stage actor, working extensively in theater before Hollywood recognition arrived. His background included disciplined live performance work, including time in off-Broadway productions, where timing and emotional precision were essential skills. That foundation translated directly into Radar's performance style, which relied less on dialogue and more on reaction, silence, and physical expression. In the first seasons of MASH, Radar O'Reilly functioned as the emotional and logistical heartbeat of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. While surgeons like Hawkeye Pierce and Trapper John McIntyre operated in controlled disorder, Radar managed supply chains, paperwork, and unpredictable requests from command structures miles away. His intuitive sense of incoming helicopters, often before anyone else noticed them, became one of the series' defining narrative devices. By the mid-1970s, Radar had become one of the most recognizable television characters in America. His signature cap, oversized glasses, and boyish demeanor contrasted sharply with the show's increasingly dark, thematic direction. As MASH evolved from broad comedy into a more emotionally complex war drama, Radar's innocence began to carry a heavier narrative weight. Episodes like Abyssinia, Henry, in 1975, which marked McLean Stevenson's exit and the death of Henry Blake, intensified Berghoff's emotional presence, as Radar was the character who delivered the devastating news in a now iconic scene that aired on March 18, 1975. Despite the success, the demands of production began to take a toll. Filming schedules in Los Angeles were rigorous, often involving long hours under studio conditions that blurred the line between performance and exhaustion. Berghoff found the environment increasingly draining as the series progressed, particularly as Radar's popularity expanded beyond what he had anticipated when signing on. Unlike ensemble actors who rotated in and out of heavy story arcs, Radar's role required a consistent emotional presence, which amplified the pressure of weekly filming. In 1979, after 7 seasons, Berghoff made the decision to leave MASH. His final regular appearance aired during Season 8, marking the end of Radar's presence at the 4077th. The departure was framed publicly as a personal choice driven by fatigue and a desire for family life away from Hollywood's intensity. Behind the scenes, it reflected a broader pattern seen among several cast members who experienced the psychological weight of long-running network television production during an era when actor welfare was less formally structured. Following his exit, Berghoff pursued visual art, particularly wildlife painting and sculpture, and became involved in designing and patenting various inventions, including fishing-related equipment. He also made selective television appearances and participated in reunion specials and retrospective interviews, but he largely stepped back from sustained screen work. Financially, his net worth is commonly estimated at around $6 million. Unlike actors who extended their careers through continuous television roles, Berghoff's earnings trajectory plateaued after MASH. When he exited in 1979, the show did not simply lose a character. It lost its quiet center of intuition, the figure who always seemed to know what was coming before anyone else did. Number 6. Jamie Farr, Max Klinger. Jamie Farr's path into MASH began almost invisibly. Born in 1934 in Toledo, Ohio, Farr entered Hollywood through a slow accumulation of small parts. In the early 1960s, he appeared in films like The Greatest Story Ever Told, filmed across Utah and Arizona's desert landscapes, and built a resume that placed him in the background of larger productions rather than at their center. His career, by the early 1970s, was defined more by persistence than recognition. When MASH premiered on CBS on September 17, 1972, Farr was introduced as Corporal Maxwell Q. Klinger, a soldier whose defining trait was elaborate cross-dressing attempts designed to secure a Section 8 psychiatric discharge from military service. The character was originally conceived as a one-episode comedic device, a brief interruption in the rhythm of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital's Surgical Chaos. Filmed in California with a rotating ensemble cast, those early episodes treated Klinger as an eccentric background figure rather than a narrative anchor. The turning point came quickly. Audiences responded not with indifference, but with recognition. Klinger's absurd persistence, stitched dresses, and improvised costumes became one of the most memorable running gags of the early series. In an era when television feedback moved through Nielsen ratings and fan mail rather than instant digital reaction, the volume of audience response was significant enough that producers reconsidered the character's role. By the mid-1970s, Klinger was no longer a one-off joke, but a recurring presence in the 4077th, eventually becoming a full-time member of the ensemble. As MASH evolved from broad satire into a more emotionally complex war narrative, Klinger's function shifted as well. What began as pure comedic relief gradually expanded into a more grounded portrayal of an everyman trying to survive an absurd military system. Farr's performance adapted to this tonal change without abandoning the character's original identity. His interactions with characters like Radar O'Reilly and Colonel Potter added continuity across seasons, particularly after major cast transitions in the mid-1970s. Unlike several cast members who left or were written out, Farr remained with MASH through its entire run, concluding with the series finale Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen on February 28, 1983. That final episode, broadcast simultaneously across hundreds of CBS affiliates, drew over 100 million viewers in the United States. Behind the scenes, his continued role was driven by a combination of audience demand and narrative utility. Klinger had evolved into a flexible character who could carry humor without disrupting the show's increasingly serious tone. Unlike more rigid archetypes, he could shift between comedic absurdity and moments of unexpected sincerity, a balance that made him indispensable to the ensemble structure. After MASH ended in 1983, Farr did not attempt to reinvent himself. Instead, his career expanded across a different spectrum of entertainment work. He became a frequent guest on television programs, appeared in commercials, and maintained a strong presence in live theater productions. He also took on hosting roles, leveraging his recognizability from MASH to sustain visibility in a changing television landscape dominated by new sitcom formats and cable expansion in the 1980s and 1990s. Financially, Jamie Farr's net worth is commonly estimated at around $6 million, reflecting decades of steady television work, commercial appearances, and long-term residual benefits rather than high-end blockbuster earnings. His career did not produce the extreme wealth seen in post-show investment ventures or syndication-heavy contracts, but it demonstrated sustained relevance across multiple decades of entertainment cycles. Farr's character was originally designed to appear once, but became a permanent fixture in one of television's most successful ensemble dramas, proving that in Hollywood, persistence sometimes matters as much as prominence. Number 5. Harry Morgan, Sherman Potter. Before stepping into the Korean War setting of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, Harry Morgan was best known for his work in Dragnet, particularly as Officer Bill Gannon in the revived 1960s version of the series. Filmed primarily in Los Angeles, Dragnet positioned him within the procedural realism style pioneered by Jack Webb, where restrained emotion and procedural accuracy defined the performance language. Morgan's screen presence was shaped by that discipline. When McLean Stevenson exited MASH after Season 3, the production faced a structural gap in leadership within the narrative. Henry Blake had functioned as a softly chaotic counterweight to Hawkeye's irreverence, and his absence required a different tonal anchor. In 1975, Morgan was cast as Colonel Sherman T. Potter, a World War I veteran and career Army physician. Introduced in the episode Change of Command, Potter's arrival marked a tonal recalibration for the series. Unlike Blake, Potter was written with lived military experience. Morgan's interpretation of Potter emphasized controlled authority rather than comedic confusion. By the time MASH reached its final seasons, Morgan had become one of its most consistent presences. The series itself was evolving into a hybrid of comedy and anti-war commentary. Potter's character often bridged those tonal extremes. Following the conclusion of MASH on February 28, 1983, Morgan continued working steadily, reprising Colonel Potter in the short-lived spin-off After MASH. He also continued appearing in guest roles across television dramas and comedies throughout the 1980s and 1990s. At the time of his death from pneumonia on December 7, 2011, 96-year-old Harry Morgan's net worth stood at approximately $10 million. Moving on, number 4. David Ogden Stiers, Charles Winchester III. David Ogden Stiers entered MASH in 1977 at a point when the series itself was already shifting into its most mature phase. Born in 1942 in Peoria, Illinois, Stiers had come through a very different pipeline than many of his co-stars. Before Hollywood visibility, he trained in classical theater at the Juilliard School in New York, one of the most rigorous performing arts institutions in the United States, where performance discipline was shaped by Shakespearean structure, voice control, and stage precision rather than television timing. By the time he arrived on CBS's MASH, which premiered in 1972 and was then deep into its mid-run evolution, Stiers was not entering as a newcomer, but as a classically trained performer stepping into a highly established ensemble system. His introduction came through the character of Major Charles Emerson Winchester III, introduced after Larry Linville's Frank Burns had exited the series. Winchester first appeared in Season 6, with his debut episode airing in late 1977, filmed on the Fox Studios lot in Los Angeles, where the series was shot. The character was designed to replace antagonistic energy within the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, but with a fundamentally different intellectual structure. Unlike Frank Burns, who embodied insecurity and rigid incompetence, Winchester was written as a Boston aristocrat, surgically gifted, culturally refined, and intellectually confident. After MASH ended, Steers transitioned into one of the most successful post-series careers among the ensemble, largely through voice acting and narration. Beginning in the mid-1980s, he became a defining voice for Disney animation during what is often referred to as the Disney Renaissance era. He voiced roles in Beauty and the Beast as Cogsworth, Pocahontas as Governor Ratcliffe, and Lilo and Stitch as Jumba Jookaburra. These roles were recorded primarily in Los Angeles studios and required a shift from physical stage performance to purely vocal storytelling, an area where his classical training in voice modulation proved highly effective. Alongside animation work, Steers maintained a steady presence in television narration and guest roles, contributing to documentaries, dramatic series, and period productions. His voice became associated with authority and literary precision, often selected for projects requiring a sense of historical or institutional weight. Financial estimates place David Ogden Steyer's net worth in the range of $8 to $10 million. He passed away from bladder cancer-related complications in his home in Newport, Oregon, on March 3, 2018. He was 75 years old. Moving on. Number 3. Mike Farrell, B.J. Honeycutt. When Wayne Rogers exited MASH after Season 3, CBS and the show's producers faced a structural gap opposite Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce. The character of Trapper John had been part of the original dynamic that balanced humor with emotional detachment, and his absence required a replacement who could preserve chemistry without replicating personality. Mike Farrell was introduced in Season 4 as Captain B.J. Honeycutt, arriving in the episode Welcome to Korea, which aired in 1975. B.J. was written differently from Trapper John from the outset. Where Trapper leaned into cynicism and spontaneity, Honeycutt was constructed as grounded, emotionally consistent, and quietly moral. Farrell's performance emphasized restraint, often playing a reaction rather than dominance within scenes. This shift aligned with the broader evolution of MASH, which by the mid-1970s was transitioning away from sketch-like wartime comedy into a more serialized exploration of psychological strain, military bureaucracy, and ethical conflict within the Korean War setting. One of the defining elements of Farrell's tenure was his on-screen relationship with Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce. The two characters formed the emotional center of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital after Trapper John's departure. Their friendship was written as deeply interdependent, often framed through shared exhaustion rather than comic contrast. Episodes such as The Late Captain Pierce and Dreams pushed both characters into more introspective territory. Unlike several cast members who exited the series mid-run, Farrell remained with MASH through its entire lifespan, concluding with the finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. After MASH, Farrell continued acting in television films and guest roles. He also moved into producing and directing, taking on behind-the-scenes responsibilities in both television and documentary work. However, his most significant post-MASH identity emerged outside entertainment entirely. During the 1980s, Farrell became increasingly active in political and human rights advocacy. He served as national vice president of the Screen Actors Guild and later became deeply involved in organizations focused on civil liberties and global human rights issues. He worked extensively with Amnesty International and other advocacy groups, focusing on political prisoners and systemic human rights abuses across multiple regions. This shift marked a transition from scripted performance to public policy engagement, with Farrell using his visibility from MASH as a platform for activism. Financial estimates place Mike Farrell's net worth at approximately $20 million. But wait, there's more from where that came. Number 2. Alan Alda, Hawkeye Pierce. Unlike traditional sitcom leads of the early 1970s, Alda's Hawkeye Pierce was written as a surgeon functioning under constant psychological and physical strain in a Korean War Mobile Army surgical hospital, blending irreverent humor with emerging anti-war commentary. By the mid-1970s, Alda's role expanded beyond acting into writing and directing, a rare level of creative control for a network television performer at the time. He wrote or co-wrote multiple episodes, including character-driven scripts that deepened the emotional architecture of the 4077th Unit. He also directed numerous episodes. This dual function positioned him not just as the series' lead actor, but as its de facto creative architect. Alda's Hawkeye also served as the emotional core of the finale. After MASH, Alda appeared in The West Wing as Senator Arnold Vinnick, and later in series such as ER and Ray Donovan, where he often portrayed figures of institutional authority or intellectual gravity. His film work included roles in projects that emphasized character-driven storytelling rather than commercial blockbusters. Beyond acting, Alda developed a parallel identity as a science communicator and advocate for public understanding of science. He founded initiatives such as the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University, focusing on improving how scientists convey complex ideas to non-specialist audiences. Financially, Alan Alda's net worth is commonly estimated between $50 and $60 million. But this next one will just blow your mind. Number 1. Wayne Rogers, Trapper John McIntyre. When MASH premiered in 1972, Wayne Rogers stepped into the role of Captain John Francis Xavier Trapper John McIntyre, becoming one half of the show's original comedic partnership alongside Hawkeye Pierce. In those early seasons, Trapper served as the perfect counterpart to Hawkeye, relaxed, charming, and less burdened by the moral conflicts that increasingly defined the series. Together, the two characters formed the heart of the show's blend of comedy and wartime chaos. But as MASH evolved, so did its storytelling. The series gradually shifted away from broad satire and toward deeper, more emotional narratives. As that transformation unfolded, Alan Alda's Hawkeye became the central focus of many episodes, receiving increasingly complex storylines and character development. Trapper, meanwhile, remained largely unchanged. Rogers grew frustrated with what he saw as an expanding imbalance between the two lead characters, feeling that his role was no longer receiving the attention it once had. By 1975, after the show's third season, Rogers decided to leave. His departure was one of the most significant cast changes in the series' history because Trapper had been such a key part of MASH's original identity. To fill the void, producers introduced Captain B.J. Honeycutt, played by Mike Farrell, ushering in a new era for the show. What happened next surprised almost everyone. Rather than pursuing another major acting career, Rogers transitioned into finance. He became involved in investments, real estate, and mortgage banking, eventually launching his own financial ventures. He also gained recognition as a respected television financial commentator. The decision proved remarkably successful. While many actors struggled after leaving hit shows, Rogers built a fortune estimated at roughly $75 million, making him one of the wealthiest figures ever associated with MASH. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.